Hey there, welcome to another club chat. I'm Sam. Today we're going to be talking about Anthy Himemiya from the Utena series.
My name's Kyle.
And my name's Moth.
Alright, before we begin, just a bit of a content and spoiler warning. So, if you've ever wanted to watch the series Utena, if you're watching it right now, or if you've even ever just faintly thought of it, turn this off right now because we're going to be covering content from the very end of the series, all of the middle bits, and the beginning, as well as some of the supplementary materials such as the movie. And these are serious spoilers that will change how you view the entire series. Like, seriously, leave now.
This is the whole shebang.
Like, if you're thinking, oh hey, this is a video I want to watch because I want to get into Revolutionary Girl Utena, don't even look at it, don't even think about it, don't even acknowledge it. Put it somewhere on your to-watch later list, go into the mountains, binge watch every type of Utena content you can, and then come back as a grizzled old man with fresh thoughts and then new minds.
Also, we are going to be covering some unsavory content as well. Utena, as a series, it covers a lot of very delicate material, stuff like abuse. So if that isn't exactly your cup of tea, we'd recommend avoiding this video as well.
Alright, perfect. You have had your chance, and now we're going to be launching right into it. So, Anthy is an incredibly complex character. Just to start off, we're going to go around and give some basic thoughts on her from each of us. I'm going to start, just for an idea of where I'm coming from. I've watched the series 4 times, healthy or not, and I really like the character of Anthy. Though that said, I don't think I can peg her as just a good, in quotation mark, character. I don't think she's supposed to be just good or bad. She's very gray. She's the most human character I've ever seen in a piece of media just because she is so complex and thought out, and you can see where her motivations are, even though you may not agree, or you can outwardly see, okay, what she is doing right now is kind of terrible. But you can also see that she's a victim in a lot of the stuff that happens to her. She's kind of this double-sided coin. She is both an abuser and a victim in these situations, and it makes her extremely interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I only actually watched Revolutionary Girl Utena one time, as well as the movie. I watched it with Sam and Moth.
Hell yeah.
Anthy took me kind of by surprise, because when I was first watching the series, my obvious interpretation of her character was, hey, she seems kind of quiet, she seems kind of submissive. It wasn't exactly my cup of tea character-wise. She seemed flat. And I kind of ignored, I guess, her character for a while. I was far more interested in some of the other major players within the series. But as you get further, a lot more is revealed. And especially around the end, it was very earth-shattering, and suddenly I had this whole new interpretation of Anthy's character, one that was muddled with, hints of subtle manipulation throughout the entire series. I don't think that Anthy is a bad person. She has done bad things to sort of encourage people into the dueling game, kind of like the carrot at the end of the stick for a lot of different players, but at the same time, I think there is also motivation behind it. Personally, I think Anthy is a good person who has done bad things as a result of her situation.
For sure, and kind of going off of about Anthy being the carrot at the end of this Akio's stick, so to say.
Wow, we're really getting into Utena-esque imagery there.
Because she's both the reward for the duelists into this Rose game, but also Anthy Himemiya is such a genius character because she does start out as this very flat, kind of almost no personality character, but that's the beauty of it. Especially because she plays various roles as the Rose Bride, and she has so many different faces, and so many people view her as all these different things, and it's genius.
Oh yeah, for sure. One thing about you guys saying that she's flat, it made me kind of realize that that's definitely part of her intentions, but it makes it so she's this perfect surface that people can project onto. They can project her into their ideal bride, their ideal Rose Bride, and that's exactly what she's supposed to be.
It's part of the genius, is that once you realize all that blank canvas appearance is intentional, it suddenly flips the whole thing on its head. And going off of what Moth was saying before about the subtlety of Anthy's character and how she acts around each of the Rose duelists, the different changes were so subtle that I didn't notice it when we were watching, but they are fucking earth-shattering when you view them in the scope of the entire series. Like, it suddenly starts to make sense that she is leading all of these, like, characters on in just very tiny ways. Like, the way that she interacts with Saionji, with, like, the journal, the way that she'll, like, play piano with Miki, all of that stuff is 100% catered towards them to be, and I hate to use this term in this kind of discussion, but to be this, like, perfect waifu for each of the Rose duelists.
Ah, indeed, the Nadeshiko. But, oh boy, what you're saying about Miki and the piano is my favorite bit of Anthy manipulation. And, like, this is part of why the rewatch of Utena is so important for the series, just so you can see all these little things, all these little ways that it showed us, like, Anthy is not what she seems, she is doing this on purpose. But the piano is my favorite example of this, because it's introduced so early on that it's easy to, like, justify how it's swept under the rug, but the fact that she only ever plays piano in that first arc when they meet Miki, that's the first and last time, and it's all just a ruse to get Miki back into the dueling game. And you don't realize that the first time, because you think, like, okay, yeah, they're just gonna drop character traits like that. It's okay, it doesn't matter, they won't be back.
Yeah.
And you only realize after watching it all, like, oh no, that was very intentional.
It's intentional that they're not going to come back because it was all a ruse from the very beginning.
All according to Kikaku.
It was me, Dio.
One of the things that I really, really, really enjoy about Anthy's interactions and Anthy's subtle changes is the changes she makes around Utena, because they are sort of the key thing that as a viewer we are cheering on. Like, Utena wants to free Anthy from this dueling game. She wants to have Anthy become her own person and become self-reliant, not completely submissive around each of these Rose duelists. But those changes themselves are just to, like, egg on Utena, and they are just to say, hey, you know, I'll be whatever you want. It's clever that even us viewers are trying to, like, go for a more self-reliant, self-sufficient Anthy, but that in itself is a ruse.
Oh yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We kind of take on Utena's role, because she's our protagonist character. She's definitely the character we're meant to, like, project onto. Mm-hmm. And so that part of Anthy we see being the part that tricks us, it is very well done, very masterfully written. Thank you, my lord Ikuni.
I just find it so hard trying to, like, figure out who Anthy really is. Because I just I understand it. I understand where she's coming from. I understand why she acts like it, but I can't explain the way that she does it. And I think it's so interesting. And especially when it comes to other people's portrayals of Anthy, especially when it comes to, like, fan comics or fan fiction or, like, any type of written writing, they kind of write her to where I'm like, that is Anthy saying words, but it's not who Anthy really is. So I was kind of hoping to get both Kyle's and Sam's take on this strange problem I'm having where, like, I'm seeing, like, this fan-written content of people portraying Anthy, but for me, at least, it doesn't feel like that's really what kind of stuff she would say or where she would act, and I don't know if that's because if I'm seeing it from, like, her masked standpoint, or if this is just kind of, like, how people would interpret the real Anthy.
Personally, my take on that is people definitely are going to have different ways they view Anthy, and there's no one true Anthy we can really nail down, and, like, even our understandings of her are probably flawed. But I think that's a result of a lot of people being taken in by the Anthy that is shown to Utena, the one that's crafted for her, this Anthy who is always in pain and, like, such a victim. Not to say that she isn't those things, but when those traits are emphasized.
Well, that's the trick, I think, with a lot of fan content, too, is there's sort of a surface level understanding of a lot of characters that people tend to jump on and tend to go for. And with a character as complex as Anthy, and just any of the characters within Revolutionary Girl Utena, you can see a lot of people take dramatically different approaches to them. Some being the flat Anthy that we see for a majority of the series, other people trying to go out of their way to show the harmful, manipulative nature Anthy shows around the end of the series, and take it to the nth degree, turn her into this awful monster. When you have characters as human as the ones in Utena, I think that's when they become almost impossible for anyone but the original writer to truly capture, because people are so used to just like a character built up of tropes, a character who is just archetypes that they can easily throw into different situations, draw a comic of them or whatever. But yeah, Anthy is a lot of different things, and that's why it's hard to capture her whole spirit. So I think we can definitely dig into like motivations, personal beliefs about her character, and maybe we can come up with something.
A place to start with that is, let's try and figure out what traits she shows that we believe are truly connected to Anthy at the core. And a place to start is, I think it's safe to say that her love of animals is an Anthy trait, a pure Anthy trait, not tailored to anyone else.
Okay, yeah.
So like, throughout the series, we see Anthy with all these different animals, most prominently Choo Choo, but we also have her hen Nanami, her cow Nanami, her mongoose that I believe is named like Mr. Mongoose.
And the octopus, and the snakes, and the snails.
Yes. Before she started naming her animals Nanami.
Yeah, which... so much. It's odd how a lot of the animal stuff is inherently related to Nanami, too. Because you have that one scene where they're in the room and Nanami keeps trying to, I guess, pull an epic prank on Anthy. And then, oh, no, I love all of these cool animals. I've got an octopus, and I've got snails, I think, is another one.
Yeah, snails was another one.
Oh, that's so like you, Miss Anthy.
Oh, it's so... But yeah, no, I think the love of animals is a trait inherent to Anthy. And I don't know if that builds into something more grand, like kind of a caring nature. That might just be more... I don't know, that might be a bit too grand.
It definitely builds into one thing.
I'm going to take Kyle's bait here, where he says it's going to build into something grand, because I actually kind of plays into what I believe is actually an inherently Anthy trait, which is going to be a very controversial stance, considering that we've also been talking about how Anthy she's shown to be cruel, she's shown to be manipulative, like, she does awful things, but I actually truly believe that Anthy at her core wants to help people. Now, this seems kind of weird, especially considering that, like, the series is not about her helping people, but one of the scenes that really struck me the most, and this is definitely endgame stuff, was when it was young Anthy and young Akio, where she took on the role of being a witch to save her brother from the mob that was outside of the house. And you don't do that if you don't actually truly care about someone. And at her core, I believe Anthy wants to help her brother. She's always wanted to help her brother. And eventually, over the series, she also wants to help Utena, and that's why she feels so bad about manipulating Utena into this game, because she's grown to care for Utena, and that guilt just weighs down on her so much.
I see your take.
I think, like, I really agree with you, Carrie, on this one, actually, because, like, early on, the early stuff with Anthy taking on that role as the witch, that self-sacrifice, that is, I think, at its core, a selfless act in attempt to help her brother. In a time of desperate need, she acted selflessly to do this good deed for her brother because she cared. Later on, as the series evolves and as their relationship evolves, it's very clearly muddled in this sort of manipulation Akio has on Anthy. A lot of the less savory stuff that we see the two get into, very clearly a result of a manipulation Akio has on Anthy. But at its core, the original impulse to help Akio was indeed a selfless act. And then if we look at Anthy as she evolves from the series into the movie, that caring for Utena and that desire to help her is in itself, like, put to the front of Anthy's character. It is, like, sent straight to the forefront. All of the, like, preconceptions about, like, oh, submissive, like, flat Anthy set aside, because suddenly she is 100% trying to save Utena from the dueling game. Like, that first interaction in the movie, where she just fucking loses her shit when she sees Utena's ring, like, that moment, I think, is very indicative of Anthy is trying her goddamnedest to help people and help Utena.
Okay. I definitely see what you guys are saying, but I think I'm gonna have to be a bit of a dissenting voice here, to add some flavor.
Of course.
Alright, so, I definitely agree with what you were saying about how she acts towards Akio and how she acts toward Utena at the end of the series and in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Though, I can't, personally, in my reading of her, I cannot agree with Anthy being a person who wants to help people. I think it is strictly limited to her brother, but mostly Utena.
Mm-hmm.
I think Anthy is very much a person who disconnects herself from other people, whether that be a result of everything going on with Akio, and basically how she advances from that flashback to where she is today. Though I think very much, if Anthy was a person who wanted to put, the good of everyone above herself, she would have let Dios die. Why I say that is because she actively took away Dios from this crowd of people saying, please help my daughter, please help, please help. And, there were some ridiculous requests in the play we see, oh, I need a date for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
But, at the end of the day, Dios was out there saving everyone, and yes, it was taking a toll on him, but if it were for the good of everyone, she would have let Dios continue even if that killed him.
Yeah.
Though,
I'm sorry, I have to interject because she was a kid when it happened. So was Akio. And when you're a kid, when you're young, you try to do what you think is best. And as an adult, the answer is obvious. Oh, let Dios die. But when you're a kid and you're Dios is my brother, you don't think about what would be the best for everyone in the world. You would think, what is the best thing for my brother? And the best thing for him was to tell everyone that he was held captive so he would have a chance to rest. At that moment in time, that was the best option because of who Anthy was. She's a kid. She wants to help her brother. So, that's where I'm coming from. That's the only way it could have gone other than letting him go help people and eventually crumble under the weight and the guilt of all of these problems.
Mm-hmm.
okay. I still have to argue for Anthy is limited to caring mostly about Akio and Utena, though as far as humans go, she obviously cares for animals, she obviously loves Choo-Choo.
Yeah.
But, in general, we don't see her help anyone else throughout the series. This is what I was saying with how she detaches herself from people. And I can't see Anthy caring about a lot of people, and though this kind of feeds into one of my readings of her, particularly her interactions with Miki. I think Anthy doesn't like Miki at all. And the reason I say this is because Anthy generally, in the student council arc, does not interfere with any of the duels, though she purposefully messes Miki up when he's dueling Utena by cheering for Utena at a vital moment and distracting him.
Oh, for sure. And I think I actually would go back and say it's a little bit too far to say she cares about everyone, because obviously she doesn't.
Yeah.
But I feel it's also not fair to talk about her cruelty without recognizing that she does actually have moments where she actually does care. It's not fair to talk about that trait without recognizing that she does actually have genuine moments of kindness. But it's hard to realize that those are moments of kindness because of all this manipulation. I feel Anthy actually doesn't really know. And this also stems from being a victim of abuse, is that it does change the way that you actually act and show empathy and emotions and actually good positive feelings other than despair and cruelty. I don't think she knows how to actually show these traits. And so when she does something, for example, when she stabs Utena in the back to stop her from dueling her brother, that was an act of kindness. Now, us and the viewer and Utena also don't view it as that. And it's not saying oh, it's the kindness and pureness of her heart. It's her way of trying to stop it. Is there better options? Well, the answer is yes. But we also have to recognize that this is a woman who's been abused, and that the only thing she's really known is abuse. So I feel we kind of have to try to see things through her way, which is also hard because we're also trying to figure out how to do that, because it's hard to see through someone's point of view if you don't know who they are.
Yeah. I think Anthy is, at her core, a victim of, a serious trauma. And that trauma itself is rooted within her childhood. And I think there's something to be said about a certain immaturity and irrational nature of, like, her person, her character. Obviously, we know, like, we've come to terms with the idea that Anthy is capable of forming, like, serious emotional relationships with people. She cares deeply about specific people. She's chosen to form bonds while still not exactly being outwardly projective of her feelings. She still feels deeply and cares about certain specific people. But as well, I think a lot of her actions and a lot of the way that she acts around certain people, it's inherently immature. I think the stuff with Mickey is very, like, it is 100%, okay, well, fuck him. I don't care. I'm going to mess him up in this key moment because, you know, I'm going to separate myself from him. I'm going to let him take the fall because, you know, I don't care either way. She didn't have to. It was kind of a rude thing to do in this, like, duel where she's not supposed to be playing a huge, like, role. She's the Rose Bride and all that stuff. But in that, she was very clearly like, you know, he could live or die, I don't care. And the same thing with that key moment at the end of the series. Stabbing Utena in the back, Anthy views that as an act of kindness. She is trying to... Well, okay.
Go on.
I think that's debatable, but at the end of the day, her action itself is irrational and is an immature action in the grander scheme, and I think a lot of that has to do with where her trauma lies.
And I want to say this before I let Sam talk, because I know you have a lot to say. But I feel like when we talk about these terms of kindness or cruelty, the obvious reaction is to view it as 100% white, 100% black. But it's kind of like when I refer to Anthy being kind, it is with that gray area, because it's like typically a good moral person would not actually do these things. They would not view these things as kind because that's just who she is. But when it comes to, like, especially with her stabbing Utena in the back, I feel like that was a scene where it was an act of kindness for both her and Utena. And it's because Utena had a very real possibility of actually winning and actually finishing this duel. And for Anthy, that is a very, very unknown plane. Because for her, this has been her life for actual hundreds of years. So she's scared. So stabbing Utena is a mercy kill for both Utena and herself. I mean, obviously you don't want to stab your friend in the back, for real and metaphorically, but for her, Anthy has seen that that's the only solution. And actually this kind of draws back to Kyle bringing up that she is very immature, and that also does play with her abuse, because it happened from an event that was very young, that has been continuous for, like I said, literal hundreds of years. And so when you're trapped in that cycle, you don't grow. And that immaturity is a real aspect and consequence of not growing up. So, I mean, obviously the rational situation would be to tell her to use words, to use other actions, to, like, not actually do physical harm. But that's the only way Anthy knows how to act. That's the only way that she knows to get her thoughts across. And it's not the best thing to do, but it's what she knows how to do.
Okay. I see what you guys are coming from, and one thing I do want to say is, when I said Anthy is not caring, I meant, like, altruistic in a sense of, like, to everyone. I can definitely concede that she's caring when it comes to the people she cares about. It's just that's limited. I see that as very limited. The main thing I want to focus on here, in my dissenting position again, sorry, is that you said, for her, if Utena had won, it would be going into the unknown. So was her stabbing Utena, could it really be this act of kindness, or was it an act of childish selfishness? Because she was afraid, and she didn't want to do that. I also do not think it could be kindness just because of Anthy's reaction. She has an exchange with Akio right after that, where Anthy has begun to cry, and Akio said, "Are you crying because you've brought harm to your friend?" And they both empathize with each other for a moment there. Really complicated bond those two have, but Anthy knows she has done something that has greatly harmed Utena. And another reason why I see that, like, this was in no way a kind act is not only does she recognize it, but Utena, even if she had lost the duel with Akio, under normal circumstances, she would have been far less harmed, because the duel is not stab the other person to death, it's take the flower out. Meanwhile, Anthy delivered a blow straight through Utena's organs.
I gotta double back so hard, because as Kara, you were talking about moving into the unknown, like, you're absolutely right that Anthy is terrified of that moment.
Oh,
because she has never seen anybody get that far. And whatever happens after that point, she has no idea. And I guess that builds into the idea of Utena being a show about these revolutions, about the dueling cycle constantly falling back on itself and rotating. And that is, I guess, in a way, kind of like indicative of the cycle of abuse.
Mm-hmm,
how
definitely.
it constantly goes back on itself. And even though, like, as viewers, as outside observers, we think that's terrible, you should get out of that, Anthy. Like, it's the same thing with Utena. She wants to free Anthy from this cycle of abuse. She wants Anthy to live her own life separate from Akio. But victims of abuse also understand that it's not that simple. Leaving an abusive partner or abusive family member, anything like that, leaving them is terrifying. And although it's horrible to have to live with someone either emotionally or physically abusing you, there's also a certain comfort and safety that comes from that relationship, because that has become the standard by which you view all other relationships. That's what you know, and the concept of leaving that terrifies you at your core. So I think Sam's absolutely right with that moment, right at the end, stabbing Utena. That is pure, unbridled selfishness, in that she does not want the cycle to end.
No, I agree. And especially with both you guys bringing that up now, I kind of want to a little bit double back. I'm not going to 100% completely, because I still kind of stand by that it was an act of kindness, but not for Utena. It's for herself. And it's like I said, it's hard to really say the word kindness, because I always feel like there's going to be a better word for that kind of emotion or feeling or action for what Anthy does, but that's honestly the best word I can come up with.
Would self-preservation work?
It would, but not in the way that, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely, I get what you're saying, it's definitely a hard one to pin down.
It's a big move. It's a tricky thing, like, because that whole scene is very, very controversial. It's a big thing within the series, it's like,
that is
saying
the moment.
one thing. That is the thing, so, saying
moment.
one thing about it is hard.
Mm-hmm. And, like, again, with all our doubling back, the point of this is, again, not to reach conclusion. It's to talk about it, and we might not all end up in the same place. This video is all about our hot Anthy takes. So feel free to disagree, everybody.
One thing I guess we could talk about a little bit is, it's not so much moving into, like, huge leaps of discovery on who Anthy is deeply at her core, but sort of, I guess, a fun parallel between Akio and Anthy that I sort of noted down in my notes. The idea of the perfect prince/princess model. Akio being very indicative, and all of the Rose duelists kind of trying in their own fashion to capture that spirit, especially Utena, trying to find what it means to be true prince. That sort of like selflessness and that super bold, caring, all of that stuff, all of those aspects. But at the same time,
that kindness nor nobility.
You gotta keep that nobility there. But at the same time, Anthy being a model of the perfect princess, or trying to reach that. The idea of, well, all of her actions, all of her sort of subtle manipulations in itself is a show of trying to reach that sort of standard. Being the exact thing that your prince wants, being perfectly submissive, being the damsel in distress that needs saving. All of these Rose duels are very much, I will fight for your honor, I will protect you. That model of the perfect princess is very much what Anthy is trying to capture throughout the series, and she does a damn good job of it. It is scary how well she can pull that off, which is funny in comparison to how a lot of the Rose duelists kind of suck at being the perfect prince.
Kind of, more like all of them.
All of them are such bad princes. Bar Utena, like, she comes close, but then even at the end, she's like, I'm sorry, I was not a prince. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, at the end, we're definitely supposed to reject this idea of perfect prince or princess. And I think using characters like Akio and Anthy, who, both are very good at presenting as these things, but in truth, really aren't. For example, Anthy is manipulative, she's straight up cruel sometimes. Mm-hmm. What a princess should not be, Whereas Akio is like, yeah, I'm a totally suave guy, and, you know, I'm always going to be caring for you and stuff. I'm going to save you. Really, he just, like, he wants to bed anything that moves.
Mm-hmm.
As a means of expressing power, but...
If it has a hole, he will be there. If it doesn't, he's going to make his own.
Oh, no.
But yeah, no, that idea of chasing perfection is, in its essence, like, it's problematic. It's not attainable. And people will, like, bend over backwards to try to get there. But in doing so, I think they will do more damage to themselves than actual good.
Oh, no, straight up.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree.
You see that with Akio's character from the very start that he was introduced to his backstory to the very end. That this is a role that has devastated him. It has destroyed him to where the only thing he can do is hold power over high schoolers and middle schoolers, because that's all he can do to, like, make him feel like he's of some sort of importance. Like, especially when it comes to the fiance that he murders with the help of Anthy, that he just wants to be in power of something. He wants to feel like he's in control. And this prince role, I feel like, has stripped so much of that control away from him that obviously it has just done so much to him, and in not a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I mean, we straight up see that it killed Dios. It was pushing Dios to death, and Anthy's intervention is what turned him into Akio.
Mm-hmm.
But chasing that ideal of helping everyone and being the perfect prince, that's what nearly killed him. And I mean, that's what we're supposed to take away here, is that, like, you cannot do this. No one can do this. Not even these celestial beings, whatever Akio and Anthy are, not even they can do this, because it's impossible.
Mm-hmm. Alright, I think I have a hot Anthy take.
Okay.
Go on.
So, obviously, we've covered already that Anthy she presents as a blank canvas for people to project on. That is a key part of her character. What I would like to bring into the equation is the idea, and again, this builds on something we've also talked about, Anthy forms these deep emotional relationships with very specific people. I'd like to bring into the equation the idea that Anthy is guilty of sort of taking on the personas of those people that she grows very attached to. Not as a whole, obviously she does not try to become them, but she herself, when she becomes emotionally invested with these people, she lets herself become changed by them. The key point obviously being Akio and his manipulation, but as well how Utena actually manages to reach Anthy, kind of being indicative of Anthy letting herself be changed by Utena. Does that make any sense?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that
I
makes
actually
sense.
really agree with you. I mean, like, fake it till you make it is a phrase because it works, because you cannot pretend to be something you're not for too long without actually taking on some of those traits. So I totally agree with you there.
Oh, for sure. And I feel like it also, like, kind of plays into a little bit of the immaturity that she has, is that she does pick up these very negative traits, but also I feel like when you're growing up from elementary on to, like, high school, you always kind of try to emulate your elders or people that you respect. And I do believe that Anthy does respect her older brother because he is her older brother. And so I feel like not, like, all of her actions are because of Akio, but, like, a lot of the stuff that she does is a result of her picking it up from Akio.
We, as a whole, our personalities and our being is a culmination of our experiences, our interactions, all of that stuff. We pick up stuff from other people and we absorb that into ourselves, and that is who we become. And I think all of, at least 3/4 to nearly the entirety of the series of Revolutionary Girl Utena, that is an Anthy that it has absorbed the manipulations of Akio, the way that she very subtly and slyly manipulates other people, the way that she hides who she truly is, her actions as that perfect princess, mirroring Akio's perfect prince. It is her absorbing those traits, taking them on, and letting that out into the world, whether that be positive or negative traits, and then shifting into movie territory, the way that she has sort of absorbed some of Utena's more outwardly revolutionary personality traits that Utena has, her sort of bold, very controversial actions. I mean, she straight up kills Akio.
She did straight up murder him.
I'd actually disagree.
About the murder, or?
Well,
it was only like a half a murder.
Sort of, yeah.
The thing is, like, was she a hand in the event?
Yes.
Yes, she was. But also, the way that I viewed the scene, it's more of him actually being the one to kill himself. Like, does she cover up the body? Does she hide the crime? Yes, she does. But she's not the one who actually killed him. Because remember, he's trying to look for his keys to run away, but he doesn't. He doesn't find that. He finds a window instead, and all she does is stand up and ask him what's wrong. And when he realizes that she's been awake the entire time he's been doing these things, he falls backwards out of shock and kills himself. I mean, yeah, she hid the body, but also, like, what else would you kind of do in that situation?
No, that's true,
That
yeah.
also goes back into her immaturity, where, like, what, like, you would do normally in that situation is reach help, like, the police and, like, let them know what's going on. But, like, this is such a huge scandal that what else could she do other than just hide the body?
Okay. Here's my take here. She did this all on purpose. She knew exactly how Akio would react. I mean, Anthy is all about knowing how to elicit specific reactions from people. She knew if she did this, Akio would be so surprised, he would be so disoriented that out the window he goes. I do think there was very much intent in her actions, and that's why she's so unfazed, and that's why she's so frankly fucking happy about Akio being dead. I mean, who wouldn't be?
Yeah, no, I was remembering that scene wrong. In my mind, for some reason, when I was thinking the scene, I'm thinking Akio's up on the balcony and she pushes him. That is what the image was in my mind.
No, she does not. I mean, I have such a hard time, like, being like, oh yeah, no, Anthy is totally the one who killed him, because for me, I think it's this is definitely from, like, a literary standpoint, but I think it's much more poetic that Akio is the one who brings about his own doom because of his actions.
Well, yeah, in a way, it's definitely still like that. I just think it was definitely a hands-off kind of murder, assisted suicide, perhaps. Yeah. I just hardcore believe that there was the intent there from Anthy.
It's not like she was holding the knife in her hand as she, like, stabbed him 40 times. But at the same time, I think, like, Anthy isn't exactly devastated either. She doesn't have this huge mourn fest, and she doesn't, like, give up on everything.
She doesn't mourn at all.
She moves on. And I don't think the old Anthy would have, like, accepted that as quick. I think there would have been a period of just sort of devastation, because that builds into what we were saying before about the fear of leaving that cycle. Her abuser is dead. She wouldn't know what to do with herself.
See, it's interesting that you say that she moves on, because she actually clearly doesn't. Like, yes, he's dead, and yes, he's physically out of the picture, but remember towards the end of the movie when she's, like, escaping from Otori, that there is one final obstacle after facing through the castle, and that is her dead brother asking her where she's going. And so, even though he's, like, actually dead, he's still holding her back.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's really true, actually, because she's still perpetuating the dueling cycle. She's still stuck at Otori, which is, in my reading at least, more of a mental place than a physical one. It's very emblematic of a mindset. We also should probably clear up the way in which we're reading the Utena movie as...
Oh, yeah.
So we're reading this as a sort of continuation where the events of the original series have happened and affected what happens in the movie.
It's like a loop. It's basically...
It's the revolution.
It's the revolution, but kind of like with all revolutions, it's not always clear-cut. It's not always like, okay, that's the end of that.
Oh, yeah.
Is that there's always going to be something that lingers. There's always going to be something that continues. And Otori, and I feel like this definitely helps with the visual style of the movie, it's very much a labyrinth because it is Anthy's labyrinth. And so I feel like the movie is very much that Anthy's actually the protagonist, while Utena is much more the secondary character.
A vehicle, if you will.
Because of how the movie handles the ending. For the original TV series, Utena is very much protagonist, while Anthy, well, even though she does have her moments towards the end, she's the focus, but, like, she's not the protagonist. Mm-hmm. So she's still very much a secondary character, and I feel like that's also why in the movie she acts so differently, is because the revolution happened. But when you're a victim of abuse, it's not like, okay, I'm out of this situation now, I guess I'm going to go to being 100% completely normal. It's like, no, that stuff lasts with you, and it lasts with you for a long time. And so how I view the movie is that it is Anthy figuring it out for herself. kind of what to do from here, or how to process these emotions or these events that happened to her. And it still is very different from the series. Like, obviously Akio is still alive at the end of the series, while in the movie he's started off with already being dead. But I guess that goes off a little bit of my point, but it's still very much Anthy trying to figure it out, Anthy trying to escape this place where she's been abused and trapped in for years. But even though she's already started this revolution within herself, she can't leave.
I think you're right. I think you have like a really good point there, because, and this, I think you mentioned this a little bit when you're talking, the idea that the movie itself is obviously like, it is a bold display of what Ikuni can do if he has a budget. Otori is suddenly this giant, vibrant, shaking, moving labyrinth. None of it exactly makes sense. And as a result of that, I think it is also indicative of Anthy's emotional state. Obviously, we are sort of introduced to the idea that Akio is dead. And that obviously frees Anthy from this manipulation, it frees her from this abuse, but at the very same time, there are always going to be echoes of your abuser, regardless of how free you have become from that. So the idea that she has continued this revolution, but at the same time, things are not exactly as they were. Things are unstable, things are shaky, and while she is cognizant of the changes, and she has sort of evolved as a person, she's still trapped, and she allows herself to escape, and then in those final moments, facing her dead brother is the final, like, hurdle. She has to escape just the emotional impact that her abuser has made on her.
I think you're totally right with that.
Oh, I agree. I totally agree.
That little analysis of the movie as a whole is, I think it's a pretty great point to kind of end our roundtable discussion on. We're going on about an hour now, so we're thinking of wrapping it up. Mm-hmm. Do we want to close with some final thoughts, some final takeaways at all?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I think so.
I think we've definitely changed, or I definitely have changed my interpretation of the character, even just in this discussion. She is not who she lets on. Obviously, she's a complex character, but I think she is still human, and as a victim of abuse, I think her actions, while malicious, show some sort of justification despite the immaturity and the irrational nature of a lot of them.
I see what you're saying. I definitely have some points that you guys brought up to think on more when it comes to Anthy as a character, though then again there are endless points to think on, endless things where you can wonder, am I reading into this, or is this like the deepest scene ever? Mm-hmm. But this has really been good for me to think about her, because she's still one of my favorite characters of all time as far as writing, because she is so complex, and just, there are so many ways you can argue, there are so many motivations, there are so many readings on her, and in a way, I think that's sort of intentional. That's what Ikuni wanted, because in a way, that lets us project onto Anthy, which is exactly what she's been having people do the entire time.
Yeah.
It's kind of this very meta gotcha, and I just think she's still really an amazing character, and I know there were times when I definitely argued, like, oh, no, she was doing something mean here. Mm-hmm. But I definitely think she has good in her. She definitely has love in her. She has it for Akio for sure, and for Utena for sure. And who could forget Choo-Choo for sure.
Oh, obviously.
Obviously, the most important character.
Oh, of course. It's all about Choo-Choo. He's getting a spin-off, actually.
It's a live-action spin-off. It's a man in a suit.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Anyway, so Anthy is still, to me, she's a good person and a bad person all in one. She is a person, and she functions like a person, and I think that's really some amazing writing.
Yeah, this discussion has, I think, furthered my fascination, but also appreciation for Anthy's character so much. It's because, from seeing, like, both of you guys' views, that Ikuni has written a character that is someone who's very imprintable for both the characters in the series, but also the people watching the series. And that even though, for me personally, I can't hate Anthy, I can't be like, oh, Anthy, you shouldn't have done that, because there is, for me, an understanding of why she acts the way that she does, that all I can go is just, I hope it gets better for you. And I love her so much. I love her so much.
Moth is Anthykin.
I am 100%, well, not 100%, but like, I am Anthykin.
We're joking, I swear to God, we're joking.
I'm not.
Okay, is that everybody's final thoughts? We all good?
Yeah, I think that's a good
I think
point.
so.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this very long club chat. If you like Utena, you know what? Join in our conversation. We'll definitely try to reply to you on this one, just because we all obviously have a lot to say.
Yep.
And thanks for joining us. We'll talk about Utena more in the future. Have a good one.
Bye!
Bye.